Hi guys, Debbie Pitts Palmer here, DPP, coming to you live. I just want to share something with you all, and I'm making this video because I want to be able to save it on YouTube so that, you know, if something happens to me, I want my kids to be able to play this back, because sometimes when they are not in a situation to really know and understand and hear the story, because I know growing up myself, I wish I had learned more about some things that I will never ever know about. So it's why I'm making this video. So thank you guys for your love and your prayers for Mama as well. But this morning I had a conversation with my son, and it was just a reflection on he's in a position right now where he's taking care of his little girl this week because his wife is out of town. So he was telling me he has this respect for single parents. He said, I have a newfound respect for single parents, especially single mothers. He said, the struggle is there. Could be a struggle there. So I started telling him some things about, well, he knew because I was a single parent raising him. But my dad was a single parent, and it was a real struggle for him back then. I can remember back all the way to about age 7. My dad became a single parent when I was 7 years old. My brother, who's next to me, he was 5, and my brother Jeff and my sister Nessa, they were babies. They were like maybe a year and 2 years old. They were really young. So Mama was not able to take care of us. Mama, bless her heart, she had a condition that wouldn't allow her to take care of us. So it was hard. My dad was not able to speak. He was not able to communicate with a voice. He didn't have one. We had to read his lips and look at his eyes. That's how we communicated with him. We had to learn how to read his lips. And I can remember the struggle being so real until I remember my dad even going to try to get a divorce. And the attorney advised him not to. He said, if you go get a divorce, you will lose all 4 of your kids. That's what my dad heard. So my dad refused to get a divorce because he did not want us to end up in foster care, because that's what was going to happen. We will end up in foster care because my dad wasn't able to speak. He was elderly. He was in his 60s, close to 70. And he did not, well, he was in his like mid 60s. So he didn't want to lose us. So he did whatever it took to keep us, little babies, little kids. So he only made $800 a month. Now that's what I remember. Somehow I remember that. I don't know if it was $800 back then, but I know before he passed, it was $800 a month is what he received. So that was not enough money to take care of 5 people. So I'm going to tell you some of the things that I remember that my dad did. That was a school around the corner from us. And my daddy was a retired chef from Illinois Central Railroad. So he could really cook. He was a great cook. So he would go around the corner in the cafeteria. He would make cinnamon rolls in the cafeteria. That was something that he did to supplement his income. Okay. We didn't have a car, so we had to walk everywhere. So he walked around the corner and he would work in the cafeteria. Well, it didn't stop right there. So when that ended, he started cutting grass. And we didn't have a lawnmower, so he would have to use somebody else's lawnmower. So he would actually cut grass for the neighbors. He would cut hedges. And everything was done manually because they didn't have electric stuff back then. And my dad was way up in his 60s doing this. He was cutting the yards every chance he would get. He didn't get a whole lot of money for doing it. Then the last job that he had to supplement income, that was a grocery store. I came out of East Birmingham. There is a community called Kingston. And in this community, there was a store called Buttress. In this store, they passed out these sales flyers. So you know how we get these sales flyers in the mail so you can know what deals the store has? So this particular store had sales flyers. So my dad went to the store. Now this was quite a distance to walk. He would walk all the way from where we lived all the way to the store, which was so many blocks away. Oh my gosh, that was a few miles away, to be honest. And the traffic was, I mean, busy traffic and everything. So he went there and asked them for a job. And the only job that they had that he could do was to pass out sales flyers. So he would get the sales flyers, and they only offered him $25 to pass out these sales flyers. He had to pass out the sales flyers in the East Birmingham area, the Stockham area, Kingston, and Avondale. That was a wide range of an area that he had to pass these sales flyers out for $25 back then. Well, because my daddy couldn't speak, I knew that, you know, I wanted to protect him. So whenever he would go out on these jobs to do these things, I would go with him. And I was a little girl. When he would bring the flyers home, we would roll the flyers up. We rolled them up. And he had this baseball, like a sash that he would wear. And we would roll them up and we would stick them inside this thing. We would stick them inside there. So we would go door to door and we would stick the flyers in the doors, in the handle is what we did. It was scary at times because sometimes it would get dark while we were out passing out these flyers, walking everywhere we went. In the sun, in the rain, we would walk door to door, sticking flyers in the community, several communities. We would stick them in the door so people could have them. And the one thing I gotta say, guys, my daddy was such a, how to put it, he was loyal, he was dependable, because you would think that he would skip a house just to get by. He did not do that. We did not skip a house. He went to every house to make sure that that house had a flyer in the door because that's what he was instructed to do. You're talking about somebody that I watched and I observed his work ethics. I did. And I wanted to be there to protect him. I need to be his voice because I knew that people would sometimes, just like people do sometimes, people mimic or bother people with special needs. So I did not want him to be out there alone without being able to be his voice since he couldn't talk. I remember that. We walked everywhere. And all I could think about is that's where I get my grit from. Because one thing about my dad, he did everything he could to take care of us, to keep us together. Something else I told my son. Every first of the month, my dad would get his paycheck. Sometimes we missed school on that day because that was like a big day for us. So what Daddy would do, he would go down the street and ask somebody for a ride to take him to Burger King. Burger King was in Avondale at the time. He would get a ride to Burger King and he would get us a Whopper Jr., whatever we wanted. That was like a big celebration for us. That meal from Burger King was just like going to Ruth Chris to us. That's what it was like. We celebrated with that one meal a month that we got. Because most of the time we go to the refrigerator, it was empty most times. My daddy didn't get food stamps. He didn't get food stamps. I don't even know if he knew how to apply for food stamps. I'm sure we would have been eligible, but he didn't know how to go about asking for assistance in any way. But he did not take shortcuts in anything he did. Because everything he did was about us, to take care of all four of us. Me, my two brothers, and my sister. I saw this. I remember when my dad would catch a bus to go to the grocery store. The grocery store was located in Norwood because we didn't have a car. Daddy would ride a bus to Norwood to get groceries and didn't know how he was going to get home. He would ask people for a ride home with his groceries because we didn't have a car. Different people would bring Daddy home every time he went to the store. He didn't know these people. And it's amazing how things were different back then. Nobody caused harm to him. I remember one time being downtown Birmingham, and we didn't have a phone for a long time. We didn't get a telephone until I was in 9th grade. We couldn't afford a telephone. And I forgot to mention that I slept on a couch All of my young years, I slept on the couch. We didn't have enough beds. The bathroom that we had in the house, you could see the ground. There was a hole in the floor. The ceiling was caving in the house we lived in. That's the best we could do. I remember one time calling home just to check on things. My sister answered the phone. My sister is no longer with us. She passed away when she was 33. She died of sarcoidosis. So I called home. My sister answered the phone, and she said, Daddy got shot. So I cried, and I remember running as fast as I could to Cooper Green because that's where he was hospitalized. So when I got to the hospital, I ran as fast as I could. I remember running full force without even stopping from like 19th Street North between 1st and 2nd Avenues where I was. They had telephone booths at that time. I ran all the way to Cooper Green Hospital. He was in the emergency room. I don't even know why I called home. Normally I didn't call home, but I called home that day. So the first thing came to my mind is that my dad is not going to make it. And that's all we have is my daddy. So I got there, and Daddy was in the emergency room. And I said, Dad, you okay? He couldn't talk, but I could read his lips. And he told me he got shot in the foot. The person, I'll tell you where he was. In our community, there was a vegetable truck would come through our community every week or so, maybe twice a week. And Daddy would go on the vegetable truck to get us vegetables or fruit. Well, somebody decided to rob the vegetable truck. And the person robbed the owner of the truck and some other people who were on the truck. Well, my daddy refused to give up his wallet. He didn't give it up. So the guy shot him in the foot. Thank God the bullet went straight through his foot. But Daddy told me, he said, I couldn't give up my last $10. That's all I had. He said, I was not about to give up. The only $10 I had was in my wallet. So he took a bullet because we were so poor in his foot because he refused to give up the only $10 he had. So he managed to come home. And I said, Daddy, from now on, if you're ever faced with something like that, please give it to them. I love you so much. I don't want to lose you. So growing up was hard. I mean, I remember when I got pregnant when I was 16 years old. And that was so hard on him. It was already a struggle for us anyway. Because my daddy could barely pay the bills off of the little money he had. Then I go get pregnant. So, but we managed after that. I barely finished high school. Daddy wasn't in a position to help take care of my son. So people in my neighborhood pitched in to help take care of my son so I could finish high school. And I felt like I was such a failure. And I remember going to my high school graduation. I played in the marching band as well. And guess what? Nobody in my family has ever seen me play my instrument. Daddy would come to see me play when I was in elementary school, but when I was in high school, when I marched in the band, no family representatives, nobody was there in my family to see me. But I still showed up every day. I showed up every day as if I had the support. Daddy couldn't be there because we didn't have a car, and he had to stay back home with my siblings. I knew he wanted to be there, but I showed up because I knew that's what he wanted me to do. I remember when he went downtown and opened up an account for me. He couldn't afford to buy me an instrument in elementary school, but he went to Forbes. I think it was Forbes, yes. and bought me a flute when I was in high school. He bought it on credit. And he knew that that was something that I enjoyed, and he wanted to see me play that instrument. And because I knew he was so proud of me, I wanted him to be proud of me, I did the best I could with that flute. I would go to practice time and time again. And I can remember even making the second chair as I competed with other people playing the flute. I made second chair in a competition one time. I wanted to make my daddy proud of me. So when I graduated from high school, no one in my family saw me walk across the stage. I didn't get to go to my prom because we couldn't afford it. My daddy couldn't afford to buy me anything to wear to my prom. I couldn't go. So then I remember wanting to take my life. I attempted to commit suicide. I was so disappointed in the way things were going. I felt like a failure. I had taken a bottle of pills, and Daddy came and rescued me. He got me rushed to the hospital, and he got me there just in time. My daddy saved my life. And and then after that, it was just one thing after another happening. Because we didn't have a car, there were times that I would go downtown to take care of things for Daddy. I had to ride a bus. And sometimes sometimes if I were to get home late, the buses stopped running a certain time. So I had to take another certain bus. So one time I had my baby with me, my son. We were walking home, and I had him on my shoulder. This guy walked behind me and placed a gun in my back and told me to go over to these weeds. He tried to rape me as I was walking home. I was terrified. My son started crying and screaming so loud, and it startled the guy. It startled him, so he ran. So I ran across the street to the neighbor's house, which was about 2 blocks from where we live, for them to call the police. So they called the police. I was not able to identify anybody because I didn't see him. It was dark. But that was terrifying to me. It took me a long time to get over that fear of somebody sticking a gun in my back. And then later on, I didn't get to go to college because I had to work. I had to take care of my son. So I worked. 2 years later, I got a little job working at a restaurant. Then I enrolled in a junior college. So I had to take the bus to school in the morning, take a bus home to walk everywhere. So I took a job, and before I took the job, I was on welfare. So welfare, I was receiving $88 a month to take care of my son. That's all I got. I didn't get food stamps because I didn't know anything about getting food stamps. I was just getting the welfare, $88 a month, and I had Medicaid. Well, trying to do the right thing, when I started working, I reported to the welfare people that I was working. All I was getting was like $100 and something every 2 weeks, but they cut my welfare off, and they cut my Medicaid off too. So you were not able to keep the Medicaid if you weren't eligible for the welfare. So when I reported that I was working, they cut both off. So I had no benefits, but then I had a child. So I decided to try to enroll in it. I tried to go to the Air Force. I went by the recruiting. I walked to the recruiting office because I didn't know anything else to do. I was at my wit's end at this point. Like, what do I do? I'm a single parent. I got to take care of my child. My dad is not going to always be with me. So when I went to the recruiting office, they told me I had to tell them that I was single parent with a child. They said, I'm sorry, but you will not be able to join the Air Force unless you have somebody to give your child to. Somebody's going to have to see after your child if you join. I didn't have anybody. I didn't have anybody to see after my son, so I couldn't join the Air Force. So once again, I was sad again. Like, what do I do? I couldn't find a decent job. I didn't have a car. We didn't have a car. I didn't have money. So one day when I was at the job, somebody walked to me when I was at the register and offered me a job. Walked over to the register and asked me if I knew how to type. I said, yes, I know how to type. They gave me a telephone number. And I dialed the number. And when I dialed the number, I forgot to mention that whenever I go to work, I didn't know how I was going to get home. Because the buses stopped running at 6 o'clock. I didn't get off work till like 7, 8, or 9 o'clock. I didn't know how I was going to get home. I would always think that I can ask somebody that I work with to take me home. It was a gamble every time I went to work, not knowing how I was going to get home. So when I was offered a job typing, I called the number. And when they answered the phone, State Farm Insurance. Because when I saw the number, it didn't have a business on it. They just asked me if I knew how to type. I said, yes. And they asked me if I wanted a job. I said, yes. So I passed the typing test, and they said, well, we could pay you $3.35 an hour. That's what I was making anyway, which was minimum wage. And said that the requirement, though, you have to work from 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the evening, but then you also have to take a break from 5 to 6 and work to 8 o'clock at night. But I didn't get paid overtime. But I knew I was not going to have a way home, so I wasn't sure if I should take it or not. But I did, because at least it gave me more hours. So a friend of mine worked down the street, and he would wait on me when he got off work. He would get off at 7. He waited every night on me to 8 o'clock just so I could have a way home, because I didn't have a way home. Buses stopped running at 6. I remember saving my money. I saved, I didn't have a lot to save, but $250. I came up with $250. And I borrowed another $250 from a friend who worked at the same restaurant that I worked. I continued to work at the restaurant when I worked in State Farm because I needed extra money. So after 2 months of working there, I decided I needed a car because it was too hard on me working like I worked without transportation. So Daddy rode the bus downtown, and we walked we walked about 4 or 5 blocks to the car dealership to get my first car. And Daddy co-signed with me because I was only 22 years old, so I had no credit. So he went with me to get my first car. And my first car, I put $500 down, $250 was what I saved, and the other I borrowed. And it took me forever to pay my friend back. So at this point, Daddy didn't have to walk to the store anymore. He didn't have to walk to Burger King anymore because I could take him. And then when I turned 23 years old, he got really, really sick. He got real sick. So he became bedridden, and I was working, again, I was working 3 jobs. I was working at Jack's Restaurant, and I was working at a theater. My dad was bedridden. I refused to put him in a nursing home. I knew also, had I put him in a nursing home, we would be homeless because the check that he was getting was at least paying the bills. So, which was only like $800 a month, wasn't a whole lot. So what I did, I got 2 people to help come and watch Daddy while I was at work, while my siblings were in high school at the time. And my son was only like 5 or 6 years old. So I took the money that I got from working at the theater and paid those sitters to sit with Daddy until my brother and sister got home from high school. Daddy was on a feeding tube, and he couldn't talk, so we got him a bell. So he would ring the bell. Whenever he needed something, he would ring the bell, let us know that he needed something because he couldn't talk. So I can remember trying to sleep at night. I wouldn't get home till like 12, 1 o'clock in the morning from the theater. And Dad would ring that bell so many times through the night. I would be so rest broken. I was so tired. And I was working so many long hours. I worked so many long hours until my son had to repeat a grade because I was not there for him. I had to work so long, so many hours, because I did what I had to do to take care of my daddy and my siblings. Daddy had gotten to the point where he would take the tube out of his nose from time to time, and then they would have to keep coming out to reinsert it. So one day I went home on my lunch hour to have a talk with the nurses because they were threatening to tie his hands. I didn't want his hands tied because back then we didn't have diapers. There were no diapers back then. So I needed his hands free so he could take himself to the bathroom. Well, he couldn't get up, but he could use the little urinal thing. So I went home on my lunch hour to have a discussion with them about the plans. And my daddy died on my lunch break. He died while I was at home on my lunch break. And that was the worst day of my life. So I remember driving to the school, picking up my brother and sister from school, because the one thing he said, whatever you do, take care of your brother and your sister. He said, take care of them. Take care of your brothers and your sister. And I did. My brother and my sister, they were just 15 and 6 years. They were 15 and 16 years old when Daddy died. And I was just 23. And I had a 6-year-old son. So I had to become my siblings' legal guardian. Okay, and then after Daddy passed away, actually, I'm sorry, I was 24 when Daddy passed away. I said 23. So after he passed away, the house that I'm telling you about, that we lived in, the house with the hole in the floor, the house where the ceiling was caving in the back, it was almost falling on Daddy's head. It was caving in. I was so determined to get us out of that. I met somebody who managed some apartments, Section 8 apartments. And I told them that we really needed a place. She told me the waiting list was a year. I said, please add my name anyway. I said, we need to get out of here. The house was full of roaches, rodents. I said, please put our name on the list anyway. She put our name on the list. And when I explained to her my story, she called me the next week and told me that it had an opening. Because all the other places that I looked at, I couldn't afford the rent. I couldn't afford $300, $400, $500 a month rent. I couldn't afford that. So this lady told me, I've got an apartment for you, and it's based on your income. So based on my income, I was able to get a 3-bedroom, 2-bath apartment townhouse for $120 a month rent with Section 8. I got an apartment over in Chalkville Manor is where it is, which was right around the corner from the school, which was great because my son could walk to school. And it was quite a distance from the area where I grew up because I grew up in East Birmingham, but I was willing to drive. I had a long drive to work, but it didn't matter because I wanted to make sure that we got out of that house. So I got us moved to a decent place, a nice place. My son was able to walk to school, and right down the street was a ballpark. I even had my son to sign up to play football, Little League. My sister and my brother, they still, they continued to go to Hayes at the time. And then later my sister signed up to go, well, I signed her up to go to Hewitt Trustfield because that's where we were. But I'm sharing this, guys, because I had a chance to tell my son this. He didn't know any of this stuff. He didn't know any of this because he was too young to know. He didn't know the sacrifices that I made to take care of him. I told him I'm so proud of him because now he's a family. He has a family. He's married. He takes care of his kids. He said, Mom, I owe it to you. But I told him about what a strong dad I had. And I got it from my daddy. I'm still taking care of my family. My brother Jeff still lives here. My sister was with me till she passed away. And I have my nephew now. So I'm taking care of my family, just like my daddy asked me to. He did everything in his power to keep us together. He didn't want us in foster care because that's what would have happened if he had done what he originally planned to do. But he didn't do that. So here I am. I made great sacrifices to take care of my family, just like he did. And I wanted to share this with you guys because sometimes when you don't know somebody's beginning struggle, you can kind of appreciate, I mean, when I celebrate victories and I celebrate success, it's because I know what it's like to not have anything. I know what it's like to be poor. When I walk around my house, I'm always saying, thank you, Jesus. Thank God. Because it wasn't always this way. I still work, and I still work hard. It didn't stop. It's just in a different way. But God is so good. He's such a provider. And now I'm taking care of my mama. I'm taking care of mama now. And I'm taking care of my brother Jeff. And I'm taking care of my nephew Sean. And I got my daughter. She's still in school. Taking care of her as well. And we got 2 dogs. I'm sorry to be such a basket case, guys, but I get so choked up when I think about how far I've come.
It was only by the grace of God. On 2 occasions, I tried to commit suicide. 2 times. Not 1, 2 times. I kept trying to give up. But God said, it's not your time. You got to keep fighting. You got to keep pressing on. You got to keep going. I can't even imagine what it would be like for my family had I taken my life. I don't know what would happen to my family because they rely on me. So God knew he had a plan for me to stay here because they need me. And that's the reason why, as often as I can, I'm going to do all I can to help people. I'm always paying it forward in some way because I know what it's like to not have. I know what it's like when people have suffered from breakdowns. My brother had one. My nephew had one. They're autistic. So I know what it's like to have family members who suffer from those type of problems. So I think I have the most patience. But I just wanted to share this story with you guys because it just fell on my heart because I was talking to my son about this morning, and I've been thinking about it all day about how blessed I am and how I've been so surrounded by so many amazing people. There's no way that I could have gotten to where I am now without the support from you guys, without the support from family members and extended family members. There's no way that I could be where I am now. I didn't do it by myself. It takes a village. My neighborhood, the neighbors that I had when I grew up, they stepped up. They stepped in. There's no way I could have finished high school had it not been for my neighbors. My neighbors took turns taking care of my baby. He was all up and down the street where people were taking care of him to make sure that I could finish high school. They did that. They did that. You know, even when my daughter came up, there were times that I couldn't pick her up from practice or something like that. People would volunteer and let her spend the night. There's always been somebody in my life who has helped in some way. I just wanted to share my story with you guys. It just fell on my heart to share that because sometimes somebody else may be going through something that may just need to hear this. Okay, guys, love you. Take care and talk to you guys later. Bye.